All right, so what are we calling this? This is the first episode of the House Loan and Order podcast,
The
right? Our
dream
goal,
team.
I think our goal here is to bring together three industry professionals who have been doing this for a long time to try to provide insights into the industry that a lot of the pundits online are not providing. So I am Doug Walters. I am a realtor. I've got over 10 years of experience in the industry. Who wants to go next?
I can go
Jason,
next. Yeah, Jason Evans, mortgage loan officer, and I work at Guaranteed Rate. Been in the industry for 18 years now.
And I'm Rick Carter from Carter Law Office, and I have been in the industry for a long time. How's that? I hate giving my years of been in the business. It shows that I'm really kind of old at this. So, but a long time I've been doing this. So
age equals experience.
That's
so
right.
Lots of closings.
Lots of closings.
That means.
Well,
Yeah.
why don't we dive in and kind of talk about what we're seeing right now, right? Week to week, things change. Obviously, rates change pretty quickly. What are you guys seeing this week? Is there any insights we can share?
I'm seeing. So I'm like you, Doug. I'm on the front end with buyers making offers and competing against other buyers in the market, and we're seeing some differences right now. So there are some properties where it's not very competitive. The buyer can go in and really negotiate and offer terms that can help them with their financing, with whether it's permanently buying down the interest rate paid for by the seller or other terms like that they're looking for. And then other cases where it's super competitive and there's multiple offers and you can't do any of that stuff, and you have to stick with some of the strategies we've been using with the quick closings and appraisal waivers and things like that. So we're seeing like the market start to change a little bit in that sense, where you can see some pretty big differences from property to property.
Yeah. Can I add a quick follow up on that? Yeah. I think to your point, Jason, like I've used, Guaranteed Rate and your services, pretty extensively. Are you finding that there are particular things that are really standing out? Like I'm seeing, for example, on my listings, more and more fully written, fully approved buyers. They're no longer just getting the full approval. They're kind of getting fully underwritten up front. Like that seems to be kind of like a requirement almost in order to submit like a competitive offer, and also access to the lender, as a listing agent saying, hey, look, ask any questions you want. This person's more than ready to go, even providing proof of funds for down payment amounts. Like I'm just out of curiosity, are you seeing any sort of like behind the scenes edges that buyers are getting? Because you're obviously working with a ton of buyers. Are you finding that the ones that are getting their offers accepted are doing certain things? Are they like quicker to respond to you? Or do they have a higher level of sincerity? Are their agents more responsive? What's getting it done?
Yeah, because I mean, if you think about it, the seller, when they're accepting an offer, they're not just accepting the sales price, right? They're also accepting the whole package that the buyer's coming with. So their attorney, their real estate agent, their lender, all important. So what we try to do for our clients is really sell them on that package and what they're getting with us and our services. So that goes from reaching out to the listing agent when you make the offer to introduce ourselves and confirm how well qualified the buyers are. Talk about how we can have complete confidence meeting our timelines, because we do offer some pretty aggressive timelines for
8 days, right?
Completed and yeah, exactly. Closing in 8 days, things like this. Sometimes they see the numbers and they just assume they're fake and that we're going to ask for extension. So, we need to get on there and confirm, not only are they real, but we're a local company. We're the number one company in the state. Like we're here to do business and we're going to get it done. So that's part of the whole package you need to sell, and not just what's your price that you're offering. And then like you mentioned too, like the upfront underwriting approval, that takes it another step as well. It's the same thing. It's going with giving the seller and their agent confidence in the buyer, right? So if they know you've already been underwritten, that's a whole nother level than a loan officer just reviewing some docs and issuing a pre-approval. So it's just really increasing that confidence level in that client to go with all the other things we're talking about as well.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I'm going to have one more thing, and I definitely want to hear from you, Rick, is as a listing agent, it really is a big deal if that first offer falls through in a market that I'm finding is softening, right? So that offer comes in and we don't qualify the buyer correctly. We aren't confident that loan is going to get all the way to the closing. Even if just a week or 2 weeks, if we go back on the market, the perception is there's something wrong with the property, even if the buyer's financing fell through just due to, I don't know, lack of preparation, right? So it can make a really huge deal, like that upfront process. I feel like it's even more important now. But what are you seeing, Rick?
pretty similar to what Jason's saying. We've seen a lot of variables that have changed in the offers and purchase and sales over the last couple of years when it was a real hot market. People were dropping out the home inspection clauses, the mortgage financing clause, the appraisal clause, and then adding in a use and occupancy clause for the sellers. I'm seeing it more back to a little bit normalcy where I'm seeing the inspection clauses back in, which I can appreciate because we can talk about it later on. But I get a lot of calls from buyers who have not done their home inspections and now have issues with the home. So I'm glad to see those back in there. I'm glad to see the mortgage financing clauses back in there because, and we can talk about it later on. I've seen situations where people think they're pretty much approved and ready to go, but there's some curveballs along the way in their financing, and they don't get approved. And without having that paragraph in there, their deposit's not going to be protected. So I am seeing now different clauses that, and you two have been great at that. The speed of a closing. I remember the first time, Jason, I think I dealt with you. Doug sent over an offer, and he says, this has to close in 10 days. I said, well, I'm going to be ready, but is this lender going to be ready? I think you had it done in 7. I think you're just really, really very impressive on this. So I have seen firsthand the two of you putting things together very quickly, which some sellers just love that, So I kind of appreciate that more than leaving out certain clauses. Everyone says as an attorney or as a broker, what clauses should be left out. I think, if you can do other things other than leaving out those key paragraphs, might be a lot more helpful, like getting a closing done in a record amount of time. So, Jason, no one has beaten your last record. I think that was closed in 8 days. So, yeah.
Well, to clarify too, that's the fastest you can legally close when you have financing. So I don't think you'll see that being.
Yeah. Oh, so you're showing off. You're saying you could have got it done in 5 days then, right?
Yeah, I mean, why not, right?
Yeah. Jason is never the weakest link. That's what I've learned. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's never going to be Jason. There'll be some link. That's the weakest link. It's not going to be Jason or his team.
Yeah.
So
that's our goal. Just don't be the weakest link.
Don't be the weakest link. Oh my God.
Time, Jason. I'm going to throw a couple scenarios by you later on what I've seen that buyers have, not been able to close. So maybe if we have a little time later on, we can talk about that. I'll throw them out to you. See what you think.
That'd be good to talk about. Rick, out of curiosity, so you kind of brought up a whole host of different contingencies, right? When you're obviously representing buyers and sellers dealing with, competing attorneys. Are you finding that they're pushing back on certain things more often than not? Or is it similar stuff? Is it kind of in line with what's happening in the industry? There's more repair addendums, so we're getting more pushback there. Is it there isn't enough disclosure happening, so we're finding, pushback on the permits or pushback, I'm just kind of curious, is there not enough diligence happening in the beginning? Is there not enough diligence happening during the transaction? Are you finding issues after closing where it's like, oh my gosh, like how did this, where did this get dropped?
Right. All right. So we're going to have to hit on one real important point right off the bat. You're bringing it up right now where, what am I seeing this, and this? One of the pet peeves I have is I don't usually get called in until all the important legal documents are already signed. How's that?
That is true. We don't operate that way, but it is true.
You don't, but most others, it's a very unique situation where, a lot of attorneys, like if you're a bankruptcy attorney or a divorce attorney or a criminal lawyer, you're called in right off the bat. But in the real estate world, we had talked about this a little bit, Doug, or you sent me a couple of questions, and one thing I'd change is, you might want to get a real estate attorney in a little bit earlier. So to answer your question, I don't see a lot of that because a lot of that's already been negotiated by the time I get into the process. So they've already discussed whether a home inspection clause should be deleted or a mortgage inspection clause should be deleted, or if we should allow the seller to stay in the property afterwards. That's already been agreed upon by the time I get it. I have to tweak the language to try to keep the parties out of trouble as much as possible. But again, that's one thing I see in the real estate world that we should probably tweak a little bit. We get calls kind of late. We're kind of, with the three of us here, I'm usually the third person in call.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's just been historically that's the way it's always been. I think a lot of people don't want attorneys in the process too early because they think we have an ability to muck things up, which could be the case. But I think that's it. I think people want just the deal kind of pretty much done, and then we'll get the attorneys in to kind of figure out the other stuff.
And do you think that's coming from the consumer, or is that coming from? It sounds to me like that's like a realtor issue.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So would you then agree that it's in a consumer's best interest to talk to an attorney up front?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Here's what I think. If you get anything out of our meeting today here is, and you don't have to get anything else out of this, I think you should line up a team of individuals very early in the beginning because a lot of buyers and a lot of sellers should be doing their due diligence. That expression, they don't know what they don't know is the case.
Yeah.
A lot of buyers and sellers don't know what they should be looking for. They don't know what to ask Jason. What should I be doing? What should I be telling you about my they don't really know that in the beginning. I think they should get a buyer's agent or a seller's agent, depending on what hat they're wearing. You got to get Jason in very early. Jason could probably tell you how a lot of the deal is contingent on how, the mortgage financing that Jason can provide for them.
Of course.
What's their credit scores, and that's going to affect what programs they get, what interest rate they get. So I think the three of us should be called in, or three people wearing our hats should be called in. You got to get a home inspector right off the bat, and an insurance.
Three musketeers.
Yeah, and then an insurance agent. So.
Yep.
Because you got to get all this lined up early. So,
what's the cost of not doing it? I think, if you don't mind me interrupting, Rick, as you bring this up, I couldn't agree more. Like, what's the cost of not doing this? I think sometimes, we get advice and it's like, oh, you should do this, or you should do that, or you should eat apples. Bananas are good for you, but it's not like, and we're like, I'll be a little bit healthier. Let's just be candid. Like, what's the downside of not doing this stuff?
Oh, I could give you about 10 right off the bat. I mean, I think, if we're all not called in early, people are going to expend a lot amount of time on getting to the closing table, which, might be very problematic on the way. I've had a few closings this year where owners didn't even own or sellers supposedly selling the property didn't even own the property. So they get all the way, they get approved by someone like Jason. They get it staged, photographed, right up to closing a couple weeks beforehand. All of a sudden, it's in the title. They don't even own the property. I've seen where someone had a right of first refusal on the house. It was actually the guy's mother-in-law, and they, she wouldn't allow him to sell. Didn't get the waiver.
That's frustrating.
It's frustrating when. I'll give you one last situation. This is actually just happened a couple of weeks ago. Pretty much getting to the closing table, and they found out this guy had 2 mortgages on the property, 3 attachments, $150,000 of tax return. Real estate taxes owed. He owed
just collecting
about
liens.
What's that? Yeah,
just collecting liens. Yeah.
And unfortunately, on that one, the broker had the septic system replaced with that septic installer, assuming they're going to get paid at closing. So when you ask, monies that could be lost, without calling you or Jason or a lot of us early in the process, it affects a lot of people. Yeah. Yeah.
I appreciate you sharing that. Yeah. If I could just sort of chime in, one thing that I see in the industry that feels very lacking is just, due diligence. Like you guys kind of do come in later in the transaction. And a lot of the expectations are set up front by the realtor. And with all the tools that are coming out now, both AI and also we have access to online, like there's so much information you can find. I was at an open house and, an unaccompanied buyer came by and they were curious about noise levels. I was like, oh yeah, just go to howloud.com. It's like based on, a variety of different credentials and they can determine, approximately how loud, certain areas are if, peace and quiet's important to you. And, they were just like, that's available. Like I think we have access. It's kind of crazy. We have access to all these tools to do all this additional due diligence, and like it doesn't seem like anyone's really using them. And that's like a very basic one. Or like due diligence, like how long does it take to look up a deed? And like check the names, right? How long does it take to, perform an analysis? There's some great tools like TopHap that allow you to do analysis. We've got RPR as realtors. So that's the one thing that kind of surprises me is the lack of due diligence in the industry, both on the buying side and the selling side. We've got, you guys know this obviously, but there's so many, there aren't many disclosures that are mandatory in Massachusetts, right? Like, please confirm, but it's just, lead paint and whether there's a private septic system, right? And then outside of that, it's, we have all these documents to provide additional disclosures, tell us information statements and items of that nature. But for some reason, those typically aren't provided, but as we're seeing this transition with the industry, all those upfront disclosure items are starting to become exceptionally valuable because the buyers can feel more confident about the property. If they're going to be paying a higher monthly payment due to, whatever rates are relative to what's affordable to them, having that confidence that they know that the property's in great condition, the seller is taking care of it, they don't have to worry about any permits, they know what's going on with the septic system, they, understand all these different pieces. I think it makes buyers, more willing to spend more money for the property, which benefits the seller. The two things that I'm not seeing as much, which may come in, are pre-inspections, like pre-inspections prior to listing the property for the purpose of finding out if there are any issues with the home, and also pre-appraisals. That I think would be interesting to see I think it actually be valuable because now that the market is starting to transition, for a seller to have an appraisal before they list the property and say, look, we know, from this licensed appraiser that it's worth this much, as an item of protection. So I don't know if the industry is going to transition that way, but it really feels like a lack of preparation is hurting buyers and sellers right now so much. And, even just co-broking, just seeing the way that, some offers are presented. Some agents are wonderful, absolutely wonderful, but there just seems to be a lack of due diligence, a lack of preparation right now.
Yeah, I think that you're right. Due diligence is the key. I think, legally, financially, and I think mentally, from what I've seen, most buyers, we have a lot of buyers come to the closing table in lot different frames of mind, where some are so excited to get there, some get there like they're so mentally fatigued from the whole process. And I think you're right. I think the more due diligence you do, the less emotionally you're fatigued. By the time you get to the closing table, because
that's true.
It's almost like anything. The more you're prepared for like a speech or anything like that, the better it's going to go off. And I think, I've seen, some crazy due diligence. You're talking about AI situation. I mean, just some basic stuff. People just did not do their due diligence on, and it wreaks havoc during the process. Yeah, yeah.
Well, let's get Jason involved here too. I feel so if we could transition, but I'm glad we're on the same page there. Let's switch over to a more fun topic. Let's talk about rates.
It's not a fun topic.
Well, it's funny because Jason, having done this 18 years, you've been through like every single cycle, right? Like you've literally seen it all. I think you were telling me that you started, when things were probably the most difficult. Clearly you've done very well and succeeded and pushed through that. For people that are like starting the buying process now, having seen all of these different cycles and having seen so much perspective in this industry, like what is your kind of take when working with buyers that are, concerned about rates or concerned about affordability?
Yeah, so I try to really educate them on, what that's going to look like going forward, right? So yes, rates are high now. They're at 23-year highs, which is significant.
Right.
The highest they've been since 2000. Last week they were at 8% for a little while. So rates are high, no question about it. The problem, though, is that home prices are also high, and they haven't stopped going up since the rates have gone from mid twos to high sevens. So rates have gone up that significantly, and home prices have also been increasing during that time. So I asked them, what do you think is going to happen when rates start to decline, whenever that is? That's going to draw all the buyers back into the market that have been on the sideline. It's going to further increase the demand for homes, which will increase prices even more. The people that are buying now, yes, they're getting a high rate, but they're also getting a better home price than most likely they'll be able to buy at in a few years. So when the rates come down, they can refinance their mortgage, still end up with a lower rate, and they would have bought at that better price point. While everyone else that's waiting, who knows if they'll even be able to get an accepted offer when there's 30 offers on a home again, because rates are back in the 5s or 6s, and
It's a great point.
home prices are shooting up. So they're going to end up paying more by waiting is the bottom line.
So it sounds like people should be looking at the opportunity cost of not buying a home, right? So it's just not only the costs we're incurring now, but what are those costs going to be if you decide to wait, and how long do you wait?
Yeah, because through all the cycles, if you look at a graph of home prices, like say in Massachusetts over the last 40 years, the only time there's been any significant decline was during the housing crisis, and that started in 07 and 08. Outside of that, rates increasing, recessions, home prices are very steady and increasing during that entire time. So, if you're counting on home prices to take a big drop or to wait until rates come down, like you're going to end up paying more in the long run. In general, if you could pick any point in the last 40 years, you want to buy sooner rather than later.
Right.
With that one exception, which is probably like a once in a lifetime event that we're probably not going to see again. That significant of a decline in home prices. So, in general, I say it's tough to time the market when you're buying a home. Right, you're buying a place to live. You're not buying a stock.
Right.
So
no kidding.
I'd say it's more based on your needs and what's a good fit for you. And then in general, the sooner you can get in, the better off you are in the long run.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense. And this is going to sound like such a basic question, but I think a lot of people don't realize how easy it is to refinance. So it's like an event that you buy now, and you've got a rate that, you don't love, but you love the property and you understand those opportunity costs, and it makes more sense to buy now, right? When rates drop 2-3%, as some analysts are predicting, in 2 or 3 years, who knows what'll happen, right? We're not predicting the future here. What does the refinancing process look like if someone wanted to refinance with you?
Yeah, I mean, it's very streamlined, very easy. You can fill out the information that's needed in 10 minutes or less. If you're working with a loan officer that you bought your home with, they already have your info. You just need to let them know if anything's changed. And a lot of times you're closing within a week and a half. So many times no appraisal is needed. It's a very, we can close a purchase in less than 10 days. The refis are the same way, really. So you're paying off your old loan, you're taking out a new loan to replace it at the better rates and better terms. So it makes a lot of sense when the market cooperates and it's available. And it's really not a huge deal to stress out over.
And if I can ask just one little other question, because buyers oftentimes ask this, in terms of, fees associated with refinancing, if rates are dropping substantially, it's always going to be a better decision to refinance, even with that upfront initial amount, because you're going to make it back so quickly with the change in rate.
Right.
Yeah.
So in general, fees on a refinance are much less than when you first buy the home. Things like title insurance are less expensive. There's less documents involved. And in general as well, we're typically able to offer no closing cost refinance options to go with that as well.
Oh, so, nice.
In general, low cost or no cost options should be available on a refi.
Cool. No, I appreciate you sharing that. I think that's the biggest thing that buyers in this market, it's if they measure the opportunity cost and then also realize that, it's a waiting game. Are you willing to pay a premium for a short period of time to get what you want now? Build equity in the property, which we can look at, past data to see, what year-over-year returns are. As long as they're okay with that monthly payment and the expectations that, rates aren't going to get any worse, I think most people can feel confident, moving forward.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Rick, what questions you have for me?
I'm going to ask Jason one on that one. So what do you think? What do you think of mortgage insurance?
So if you have good credit scores, mortgage insurance is relatively inexpensive at this point compared to where it was 5-10 years ago. So if you have excellent credit scores, the MI companies have priced those accordingly. And, a company like us, Guaranteed Rate, we work with all the top mortgage insurance providers. So we run an exact scenario through all of them. There's like 6 of them now, and you get the best quote, and you just go with that. So mortgage insurance isn't the end of this huge problem that it's going to be an overwhelming expense for the clients anymore. And, there's a lot of good loan options available with less than 20% down because of it.
It almost seems to make sense sometimes to go with the mortgage insurance and instead of keep chasing the market. So, you might be able to buy into something right now. You might have to put in mortgage insurance. And I'm not saying this is right for everyone, but you buy a house now, get mortgage insurance, you pay X amount of dollars, however that's factored in, and we've seen over the last couple of years, prices go up. That same house is now $100,000 more valuable next year. You can get rid of the mortgage insurance. So
Right.
instead of that old adage, that all our parents told us was to make sure you have the 20% down, mortgage insurance is kind of a waste of money. It seems like, instead of chasing the market, that might be a better, a good option for some first-time home buyers.
Mm.
Yeah, no, I think it's important to keep good reserves in the bank, keep cash on hand, because if you tie it up in your home, maybe you're saving a little bit more on a monthly basis, but you lose access to that money if you have an emergency or have another need for it.
It's a great point.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So if we look at sellers for a second, right? Let's say, we know that, let's say people bought their home, they've got a really great rate, but they do want to move, they do want to transition. As rates come down, they're thinking about selling. Rick, what would you recommend for a seller who's in that position, who's thinking about selling? Like, how do they start the process? Like, what are they, they're watching the market, they're trying to figure out who to hire, they don't exactly know what's involved, they know they want to move, but that rate is kind of like an asset now. What can they do? How should they prepare?
Well, regardless of the rate, I actually think, and this sounds self-serving, but for any seller who's thinking of selling, I really think people should call months before they're selling. They probably should call the three of us, believe it or not, if they're selling. They're on Jason's end, their rate, as you're saying, might be in the twos. I mean, do they qualify for that new loan? So they might want to talk to Jason about that. For you, I think, getting them in earlier, months before, their house is being listed. I think you might tell them, all right, we should be staging this or decluttering it or, depersonalize it. There's an art to selling a property, whereas, you can't just do that within a day or two. I think there's a lot of preparation to it.
When are you getting your license, by the way?
To me, I think if I get called in early, I'd be doing their title search right off the bat for the reasons we were talking about earlier. I would do it months before they sell because we can eliminate, that issue that things aren't delayed. Related to Jason's world, in all purchase and sales, the seller is allowed to get 30 days to correct a title problem after the scheduled closing date. But most of us buyers attorneys put in there that, all right, we're going to give you 30 days unless our rate is expiring. So the rate might be expiring, a week after, the closing date. So, so technically the buyer could get out of it if there's a seller problem, a title problem. So there's just a host of issues that I think people, if they were more proactive about things, they can nip in the bud. Smoke detectors is a problem. Yep. I've seen a lot of situations where, the broker waits till a week before the closing to get the smoke detector certificate, and they find out the fire department, some fire departments are legendary. Revere's is very tough. They'll say, why is this extra kitchen in the basement? I've seen them where bedrooms are shut off. So that 4-bedroom house that you're planning on getting has now had 2 of them shut off. I've seen, oil tanks being out in violation. I mean, I don't know why that's waited. They wait to the last second on that stuff. So when you ask me, I think, a lot of prep work should be done as opposed to, just reacting to things. I think, they always say the good planners are great at, reacting to an issue, but, the great planners, proactively take care of those issues before they become stumbling blocks. And, so when you ask me how can a seller protect themselves, is they should be calling definitely you and definitely an attorney. And now I think Jason's on the list to, to be called on to make sure they're qualifying for their new loan.
Right.
So I don't know. I think there's a lot more prep work that should go into things. Condo documents. You and I have run into situations like that where sellers aren't even marketing the condo correctly. And, a smart buyer's agent comes in and, calls them out on that and ends up reducing the purchase price. So you could probably give us an example on that one, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Doug, what do you tell sellers who call you up and are like, how do I get the highest sales price for my home? Do you have any tips for them, or like, what are you trying to direct people to do in this environment we're in now?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a great question. It's a multifaceted approach. I'm super analytical, as you guys know. I'm a mega nerd. I won't show you all the technology I own, but it's
Mhm.
it's funny because there's so many different ways to do it, and I always get shocked when people don't kind of like pull those levers. I think the easiest way to do it, like as a quick anecdote, I was selling a property for a client that bought last year. Typically, when you buy and sell a year later, you lose money just because of the fees that are incurred through the transaction. They're actually going to get ahead. The market, year over year is between 4 and 6%. They're selling for a 9.14% increase, which is insane. But the way that we were able to do that is they were able to buy the home for a deal due to the property not being marketed very well. And then I was able to list the property and sell it for a premium due to how well we marketed it. So I am finding that, the best brokers use innovation, right? We're using innovative tools and marketing to get the highest possible price. So it's a mix of things. You need to do enough of a data analysis to ensure that the pricing makes sense. You need to do enough marketing to ensure that you're going to capture as many buyers in the market as possible, which is, photos, video, 3D tour, property website, drone, floor plans, Facebook advertising, Facebook video advertising, pretty much anything you can do to get people in, calling the neighbors, sending out mailers, doing, large open houses, answering people's questions, doing upfront disclosure on a property. I mean, to be honest with you, it's pretty comprehensive. And I probably hit on like half the things there I can think of off the top of my head. So getting the highest price for a property is incredibly involved. And the thing that kind of kills me is you can go on MLS and see what everyone's doing. And I think it's pretty clear that like the industry as a whole is doing very little. So my hope is that, we continue to innovate and start using these tools, to get the highest price. I actually don't think it's that hard to get the highest price, Jason. I think what might need to change is sellers starting to pay attention to the way the homes are marketed. It may not, this is going to be very controversial, but it may not make sense for agents to pay for marketing for homes. It may actually make more sense for sellers to pay for it. Like I include a ton of marketing with the service that I provide, and I use that as a competitive edge. But sellers have so much more on the line if the marketing isn't done, right? So let's say, for example, I can invest, let's say I can invest $1,000 and make you 10,000 when I sell your house. You'd be like, Doug, like, come on, man, like, please do that for me. But the problem as a broker is for them to break even with that. If on a 2.5% commission, the house would have to sell for $40,000 more. And to spend $1,000 to get an extra 40,000 is really hard to do. It's possible, but it's really hard to do. So I think, unfortunately, a lot of agents are underinvested, like seriously underinvesting in the sale because they're not getting the returns. Whereas if the seller were to invest that money intelligently, they could get insane returns. So I think that's, candidly, marketing, using innovative tools. We've had these tools for so long. I look at the I look at the way properties were sold 20 years ago. You look at the way properties are sold now. You look at the MLS sheets and you're like, what has changed? It's a little sad, to be honest with you. But the good news is there are brokers out there that are actually innovating, that are actually using marketing. And, there are some great tools out there. I'm very fortunate to be in a peer group of some very talented realtors that are really, competitive. I think the market benefits when people are competitive. Like I want to be pushing every realtor to offer more service, and I hope they're doing the same for me.
That's super helpful. Thanks, Doug.
Yeah. Sorry, long response. So if I could fire back to you, Jason, I think sellers are in a situation where they don't have enough proceeds, right, to purchase a property, or they're going to be using equity from their home. I think a lot of people, when they hear bridge loan, they get a little scared. When they hear HELOC, they're like, what's involved with that process? In general, I think most sellers don't want to have home sale contingencies, right? Most buyers don't want that either, right? We generally want like a clean sale, so we're not daisy chaining all these sales together, right? What do you recommend for sellers in that situation? Like, is a bridge loan with a very motivated agent a really good strategy? Is the HELOC the right call? Is the contingency the right call? What do you recommend?
Yeah, I mean, the contingency is ideal if you're the one selling the home and buying the new home, but it's not always practical, right? Like that
Yeah.
in this market, it can be very difficult to get an offer accepted on your next home. if it's got a home sale contingency. So
Right.
most of the time lately, that hasn't been an option. We have seen it, but it's pretty hard to negotiate, right?
Mm.
So what we try to do is qualify the buyer to purchase the new home prior to selling their current home. Now they can make a non-contingent offer, even though they might be working with their agent like you, Doug, to still sell their home at the same time and make it all line up, because that's
Yep.
what they want ultimately. But
Yep,
they
yep.
may be qualified to not have to have it done that way. So that's the ideal situation. And really it comes down to a couple of key factors. One, will their income be strong enough to support owning the two homes? Because even though they're planning to sell it, we have to underwrite them as if they own both homes for the long term, because we don't know when they're going to end up selling it. So one, their income has to be high enough to support it. And two, they need to come up with at least a minimum down payment. You know, they don't need to have a down payment equal to what they would be putting down if they were to sell their home at the same time. They just need to meet minimum underwriting standards. So that can range anywhere from, 3.5% to 20%, depending on the scenario and the price point of the home. So we'll work with them to brainstorm ideas on where they can get that liquidity from. Some buyers are fortunate enough to have access to that money pretty easily. Others, we need to do a little work for. So
Great point.
some common things we'll come up with for them would be accessing equity in their current home in the form of a bridge loan, like you mentioned. Another would be, depending on how much they need, maybe they can access a 401k loan. They can borrow against a retirement account as a short-term loan to get some liquidity and then pay it off when they sell their home. Some people are fortunate enough to be in positions to get gifts from family members. So as a gift, that can count towards your down payment as well. So all these are options that we'll throw out and work with the client on to see what the best fit for them is. And a lot of it too just depends on how much they need, right? Like if they need 25 grand, maybe a 401k loan is a cheap, easy solution to get access to money. If you need hundreds of thousands, then maybe you do need to tap into the equity in your home if you don't have that liquid. So it's ways to kind of get creative and think outside the box so that you can make that offer without a home sale contingency, which is really what you need to do.
Gotcha. Yeah. No, I just didn't mean to interrupt you. I was thinking off the top of my head, like go set up like a GoFundMe,
Right.
ask your friends, ask your neighbors, like, hey,
that's one that wouldn't be allowed for underwriting, but so also you want to run it by your loan officer to make sure where you're pulling this money from. If you're getting it from under the mattress, that's not going to fly with underwriting in most cases.
So the answer is run it by Jason. Always run it by Jason.
Yeah. They don't want you just showing up to Rick's office with a bag of cash and saying, here's my down payment, right? They want to know where everybody's going from. So,
Jason, you're proving my point. They should be calling you earlier. A lot of times they don't have this thought process where they should be just getting everyone together. Say, listen, how am I going to afford not selling my house but buying this other one? I mean, there's some planning involved, and I mean, to me, I think the biggest problem in this industry is the time frames of when people are really doing things, and that's a big one now. They really should be calling in someone like you to chat about this stuff early in the process.
Everybody talks about first-time buyers. There's also first-time sellers, right, that are looking to buy again, and it's an even more complicated process in that case. I think way more complicated than when you're buying your first home. That's pretty straightforward, other than not being familiar with the process. So, a lot of first-time sellers that are looking to buy call you up because they just saw a home and they want to make an offer on it. But like you said, that their options could be limited in that case if they haven't planned ahead and figured out their numbers and where they're pulling the cash from and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, gentlemen, I appreciate everything you share here. Why don't we kind of wrap up? So if you were a buyer or seller, right, in the next 30 days, what is the best advice you could give to buyers and sellers for the next 30 days? Rick, let's go to you. What would be the top advice out of all the things we talked about? They're all valuable, but what would you say if you could pick one thing for buyers, one thing for sellers? What would it be?
For sellers, definitely call and get your title search done early, because I see it all the time. I'm always dealing with title problems. It slows it down. A lot of parties are relying on you to close on that date. Mover companies. You got buyers their leases have expired. The sellers are moving on to their next one. I don't know why they just don't get their title in order before they list a house. As far as a buyer, it's probably related to Jason's world. I have a lot of tips, but if you ask me for one, is they seem to ignore the the mortgage financing clause in the purchase and sale. I always tell buyers and sellers, you should glance over the purchase and sale. We'll do the legalese for you, but there might be some things that you haven't told us about. We're not getting in there. And the biggest paragraph in the purchase and sale is the mortgage financing. It tells you what date you should be applying for the loan. A lot of buyers ignore that. It tells you the maximum amount you should be borrowing or applying for, and it tells you when to get that financing approved by. If you don't have the financing by that date, you need to notify the seller to preserve your deposit money. And a follow up to that is, and Jason will tell you, just because you get a commitment letter, that doesn't mean you're approved. There could be a few conditions on there that might throw you off. Where I've had a buyer blow off one of the conditions on the mortgage approval letter. It was a simple condition, said we want to see your last 6 months statements, and she said, "Oh, that's easy. I can get that to them." And she blew through her commitment date, thinking it was so easy. But the lender was actually trying to find out if she was able to verify the child support she was getting, and she was not able to. She got denied the loan. She could have lost the deposit money if the seller wasn't so cooperative in letting her apply at another lender. So if I had one thing for a buyer, I'd say you got to keep an eye on that mortgage financing in this day and age.
Where was the agent on that?
I know. And who was the lender on that too? The lender should have probably told her, we're really looking for something in this, condition. It's not just to amuse ourselves. We really need something here.
Not all lenders are made equal.
I know. Never a problem with Jason because he closes in 10 days anyway. So we don't have to worry about it.
Those problems never come up. You're done before you start.
No time for anything to go wrong.
Yeah, exactly. That
should be the slogan. We get it done before things can go wrong.
Yeah. If there's any issues, you're already closed. They've already moved in.
I love it.
Yeah.
Jason, what's your take? So for buyers and for sellers, what would be your top advice the next 30 days?
For buyers, I would say don't get hung up on rates. Try to focus on what really matters, and that's your budget. So how much are you comfortable spending monthly for your house? Let's start with that number, and then from there we can back into what home price you can afford, and how much of a down payment you need. From there, you can connect with you, Doug, to see what's available in the market, and if it's going to be a good fit for you and for where you want your house to be. So try to focus on the actual numbers. The monthly payments are what's really important. That's what you're committing to over the long run. You're not looking at your interest rate month in and month out. You're making that payment out of your checking account. So try to focus on that and see if you can afford a home in this market. And if you can, great, go for it. And then, like you said before, you can always update your rate when the market changes and rates come down. So that would be one, is don't get worried about where the rates are, but focus on the actual numbers. And then for sellers, really it's connecting with someone like yourself who's going to be an expert in the market, be able to walk you through a full marketing plan, like you said, because the market's changing from town to town and from week to week with rates, really. So you want to have someone that's pulling out all the stops to market your home and make sure you're going to get strong offers in any market, and not just working with an agent that's going to list it on MLS and hope for the best. So I think that's really critical, especially coming into the winter months where there could be less buyers out, traditionally speaking, at least, especially with rates being up. You really want to do everything you can to market the property properly.
Oh, those are great points. I was reading something recently that was saying the peak to trough seasonality averages at 12%. So for $1 million property, it's $120,000 difference. I mean, that is not a small amount of money, So I think having a strategy behind that's super important. The advice I'm going to give is actually both for buyers and sellers. It's to hire the right people. It is unbelievable. There's a statistic that it's funny behind the scenes for sales for realtors. A lot of trainers will say there's a statistic that like 72% of sellers hire the first realtor they talk to. So all you have to be is the first person to the door. It's like, is the barrier to entry and it's like our what we care about for quality that low that it's just like be the first person to the door, and I think it's really interesting that consumers' expectations are that low. It's like, hey, here's someone who could solve my problem, but we're not thinking about how well could they solve that problem, right? You could hire a lender, or you could hire an expert lender like you, Jason. You could hire an attorney, or you could hire an expert attorney like you, Rick. And obviously, you're going to get such drastically different results. It really is kind of crazy to me that there's such a lack of consumer understanding around the differences you get with different realtors, different attorneys, and different lenders. I've seen, as I'm sure you have, consumers lose tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars hiring the wrong agent. And I've helped people make tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars or more than their anticipated results just from doing the right thing. So I think my advice to people is, I trained a lot of agents. I know, Rick, you have trained a lot of agents too. My general synopsis is about one, and this is going to sound mean. I don't mean to sound mean. I'm trying to push the industry forward. I think 1 out of 20 agents is like really good at this job, takes it seriously, invests in the client, provides a high level of care, right? So as a consumer, you've got to find that top person, that person who cares about you, cares about your family, wants to get the best results. You got a 5% chance. So I really, really recommend doing some due diligence. You're going to hire a neighbor, but bring in 2 other people. If nothing else, you might be able to negotiate down the commission rate, or get some additional services. There's different ways to do it. I think consumers really should be interviewing more people in the process. You shouldn't just hire the first person to the door.
Those are great points. Definitely.
Unless it's Jason or Rick. If I have referred you, Jason or Rick, I highly recommend working with Jason or Rick. I have already vetted
close
them.
In a week or so.
You are guaranteed to get a great result. Just work with them and be happy. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much. This has been great. I really sincerely appreciate your time. Hopefully this information is valuable to anyone who's watching or listening. This is the first episode of House, Loan, and Order. We'll be coming back to you hopefully soon. Thanks so much, gentlemen. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
See you, Rick.